Okay, in today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the differences between buying, renting, and leasing for different options for obtaining something or getting use of something. In your textbooks, this is section 2.4, titled Buy, Rent, or Lease. And it's a little bit about some of the different things that you tend to think about when you're making a choice between whether buying, renting, or leasing something. So, we'll start out straight away by talking about the different terms. Um, Buying is pretty straightforward. You outright own the thing that you buy. So buying is taking ownership of an asset, which can be a number of different things. It could be a piece of property, it could be an object, that sort of thing. Is property, vehicle, etc. of an asset. By paying a set price for it. Renting and leasing, we'll talk about both, and they're fairly similar to each other. Renting is a little bit less complex than leasing. Renting is paying a regular fee for the use of someone else's property. And I'm using property in a very general sense in this case, because that could mean someone else's land, to rent an apartment, it could be to rent a vehicle, that sort of thing. In leasing, the difference is a little bit subtle, but leasing would be paying a regular fee to take temporary ownership of some property, of an asset. And in each case, there's certain advantages or disadvantages to buying something or renting something or leasing something. Talk a little bit about the pros and cons of the different options. In buying, you then have sole title of the asset that's been bought. Um, Buyer takes sole ownership of the asset. No one else has any stake in it, and you can then turn around and buy it, or turn around and sell it to someone else if you so choose. You can do whatever you wish with it, having ownership of it. So that would end up being a pro of this. Now, a con of that is then the buyer then has all responsibility for upkeep and maintenance and all that sort of thing. Buyer has all the responsibility for upkeep, maintenance, recurring costs, and so forth. Now, one of the big pluses for renting is that all responsibilities for upkeep and maintenance and recurring costs typically fall back on the owner of it. most responsibility for upkeep stays with the owner. For instance, if you go and you rent an apartment and then all of a sudden there is a plumbing leak, the responsibility is on the owner of the apartment, not on the renter, to have that repaired. With certain circumstances taking effect. If you were to go and take a hammer to the pipes and that's what caused the leak, then you could be fined liable for the cost. But in general, any sort of repair and maintenance that has to happen belongs to the owner and not to the renter. The downside of that, of course, is someone else owns the asset, and can make decisions about ownership or change the asset as they see fit. Um, and one of the big downsides of renting is that you don't get any equity in the property in question, meaning that as soon as you're done renting, that's it. You don't get any more for the money that you put out. For instance, if I were to go and buy a home and live in it for 5 years, at the end of 5 years, I could then sell the home and get some money back for it. If I were renting a home for 5 years, then as soon as I left, that's it. I have no equity or nothing else that comes from that, which is all someone else making decisions about ownership or profiting from ownership. Leasing is sort of a strange combination of the two. Leasing is sort of a combination. You have a few more rights of ownership than you would if you were renting, and a few less responsibilities uh, than if you owned it. So it's a bit of a hybrid between the two. Um, and a lease situation could look almost identical to renting, but there's also things out there called lease to buy, in which case at the end you can take a bit of money off and buy the object outright and then take complete ownership of it. So leasing is a bit of a mix between the two. As far as which is a better choice, it really depends on the situation and the time at hand. If you're talking about a home, most people will say it's better to buy if you can swing it, because that way you get something back for the money that you put out. Having said that, you know, if you just needed a place to stay for a couple of nights while you're visiting town, then obviously you wouldn't go and buy a home to fulfill that need. You'd probably just rent a room for a couple of days. Um, Different things work better for different situations. Um, a couple of other terms that I want to mention before I get into a few examples of working with this. But ultimately, the question of buying, renting, or leasing from a mathematical point of view is just going to kind of be a conglomeration of the different things we've talked about to this point in depth. But a few more terms here, including a couple I've used to this point. Equity is value of an asset I should state that differently. Portion of the value of an asset that the owner has. And when I talk about that, I say something like, if I have a mortgage on a home, I am treated as the owner of that home, but assuming I'm paying off the mortgage, I don't fully own the home. I own a portion of it, and the bank owns a portion of it. The portion of it that I have paid off would be said to be the equity that I have in the home. Disposable income is the amount of income that you have after you have paid off of any necessities. Amount of income remaining after necessities have been paid for. So, for instance, let's say, just to grab a few round numbers, my take-home pay for a month was $2,000. If from that $2,000 I've got to spend $900 on rent, $200 on phone and internet, 100, $150 for electricity, that's $1,250. And then $200 for the miscellaneous goods like food and that sort of thing. That's taken me up to $1,450. That would mean I would have $550 left as disposable income. Money that I can then choose to spend whichever way I want, whether it's an investment or whether to pay for some other things that have cropped up or buy a luxury item, something I don't particularly need, that sort of thing. And then sometimes you'll hear the terms appreciation, depreciation. And that is a gain or loss in value of an asset over time. For instance, most vehicles tend to depreciate with time. If you go out and buy a new vehicle, a year later that you would not be able to sell that vehicle for the same amount you paid for it. It would have depreciated in value. Having said that, if you go and buy a home, you kind of hope that over time it would appreciate in value. You would be able to sell it for more than you paid for it on the other end. And different factors go into whether an object appreciates or depreciates. And if you ever go and do any sort of accounting at all whatsoever, if you have any assets involved, there's usually a formula to talk about the appreciation or the depreciation of assets over time. Alright, with that we'll just dive into a few examples of looking at questions of whether to buy, rent, or lease an object, a piece of property. It says example 1 on page 121. I'm trying to think where this starts. We've got a statement, but we've got no question. Oh, this is really coming from... Yeah, sorry, I apologize. It starts on page 121, but the question's actually asked on page 120, so 120, 121. Question is regarding Amanda, a civil engineer. She needs a vehicle for work on average 12 days each month. She's been renting a vehicle when she needs it. The advantage to renting is she simply fills the gas tank and drops off the vehicle she was done with it. The disadvantage, she has to spend time arranging for the rental, picking up the vehicle, and getting home after dropping it off. Now this might all sound like just little sidebars, but if in the real world you're out choosing how to work with a vehicle, then those are important pieces of information. How you're going to get the vehicle, if it's something you're renting, could change your decision, depending on how easy or hard it is for you to pick up a vehicle every day. So she's looking at her options. Currently she's renting. She could lease a vehicle, which requires a down payment of $4,000 and lease payments of $380 each month plus tax. She would need insurance at $1,220 each year, which could be paid monthly. I would have to pay for repairs and some maintenance, which would average $50 a month. For the 4-year lease she's looking at, she would have no equity in the vehicle at the end of the term, meaning that all the money she puts in, she doesn't get any stake in the vehicle. At the end of the term, simply done, and the car goes back to the dealership. Or she could buy a vehicle for $32,800 and finance it for a 4-year loan at 4.5% interest compounded monthly. She'd have the same insurance, repair, and maintenance costs she would have with leasing. However, the equity of the vehicle would be considered an asset, meaning she would own the vehicle at the end of it all. Or she can continue to rent at $49.99 per day plus tax with unlimited kilometers. Which option would you recommend for Amanda and why? So, we look at the different options. Renting is often the easiest one to figure out, so we'll start with that one. She needs work for 12 days every month over a 4-year stretch, is what the other term's for, which is what we'll compare it to. So that's 48 months. 48 months times 12 days a month. Means she's renting this for whatever 48 times 12 is, which, given where my brain is today, I'll dig out the calculator for. $576 days. Now, she rents at $49.99 a day, plus tax. Now, we're not given any information on the tax rate, so we are just going to take it as stands. In each case, our answer will basically have to say plus tax, but since plus tax is going to apply to everything, then it wouldn't really make a big deal in our choice between different options. So 576 days times $49.99 per day tells us the total cost of her renting this vehicle over 4 years is going to be $28,794.24. The renting portion of the program. We'll look at leasing. So she got the down payment of $4,000. She's making lease payments of $380 per month plus tax. We already know there's 48 months involved. So 48 months times $380 per month means just in lease payments paying $18,240. But there's also insurance at $1,220 each year. So that is another $48.80 in insurance. And repairs and maintenance will be $50 each month. So 48 months times $50 a month for maintenance. Or $2,400. Put all that together. I've got 4,000 plus 18,240 plus 48.80 plus 2,400, and the lease option is actually $29,520 overall. Which leads us to buying outright. And in this case, she's taking out a loan to do this. she is making monthly payments. So we assume it's monthly payments for 4 years, which means that's going to be 48. She's getting an interest rate of 4.5%. She has borrowed $32,800 to do this. We don't know what the regular payment amount is, but she's paid it down to zero at the end of the 4 years. She's paying monthly, and it is compounding monthly. If we work that all out with our formula, her monthly payment has got to be $747.95. So she pays out 48 times 747.95, or $35,901.60. But we're also told that she's got the same insurance and maintenance repair as she would have with leasing. So the total for this would be the $35,901.60 plus the $48.80 for insurance from before, plus the $2,400 from maintenance. Put all that together, and it is $43,181.60. And in each case, you could work that out to a monthly statement if you wanted to compare what your out-of-pocket would be every month. In the first case, it'd be $28,794.24 divided by 48, or $599.88 a month. For leasing, $615 a month. And to buy, it'd be $899.62 a month. And in each case, that's before taxes on the insurance and the maintenance and all that sort of thing. So, now to compare. If I just go flat out cost, it seems like renting is the best way to go. Certainly better than leasing. In each case, in both the rental and the lease option, she doesn't own the vehicle at the end of it. At the end of the 4 years, that's all done. So leasing seems to be definitely out, because in each case you don't own the vehicle and you pay less for renting. Plus there's less responsibility on you. The only way that leasing would be any better is if there was some cost or annoyance put out with having to go and pick up the vehicle every day you use it. The added benefit to leasing would be that you would have the vehicle all the time in those 4 years, whereas in renting it you just have those 12 days a month. That could be a deciding factor in that as well, convenience. But for just straight out money and what you have at the end, renting is definitely better than leasing. Now, as to whether renting is better than buying, there's a question that we don't really have enough information to answer, and that's how much do you think you could sell the vehicle for at the end of 4 years? If you could sell the vehicle for about $15,000, buying might be a better way to go. If you don't think you could sell it for that much at the end, renting is probably the way to keep going. So, those are the sorts of things that you ask yourself when you're asked about whether to rent, lease, or buy something, depending on the situation. We'll go through a few more examples with this. This would be example 3 on page 124. And this is about a water heater. When your water heater goes out, you need a new water heater. That's not something that you can really argue with, which any of you who have had to take a shower with no hot water will know fairly well. The 10-year-old hot water heater in Tom's home stopped working, so he needs a new one. Tom works for minimum wage. After paying his monthly expenses, he has $35 in disposable income left. He has an unused credit card that charges 18.7% compounded daily, so he has two options to buy this water heater. He could lease from his utility company for $17.25 a month. This would include parts and service with the lease. Or he could buy a water heater for $712.99 plus an installation fee of $250 using his credit card. He could afford to pay no more than $35 each month on the credit card. There's a few sub-questions. What costs are associated with buying and leasing? What do you recommend for Tom? Justify a recommendation. Suppose that the life expectancy of water heater is 8 years. Would this change your recommendation? So, let's look at buying versus leasing. Leasing is certainly the easiest way to go. $17.25 a month. Boom. He's got $35 disposable income. That's going to get cut in half to lease this new water heater every month. It'll take care of all repairs or anything else that comes up. Buying. In order to buy this thing, we don't really know how long we're doing this for. The credit card is 18.7% compounded daily. Now, a lot of times a credit card won't charge you interest if you manage to pay the balance down in 1 month or within the time, 1 month within the time you buy things with it. Now, Tom is obviously not going to be able to do that. To buy the water heater, $712.99 plus $250 installation, and he's only got $35 a month that he can spend on this. So he's not paying it off all at once, so the interest on the card is going to be applicable, certainly. He is borrowing the $712.99 to buy this plus the $250 installation fee. If he uses all his disposable income to pay this debt down to zero, we can figure out how long that's going to take. He'd be making monthly payments, and the compounding is happening daily. So if we work all that out, we find out that Tom is going to take $36.31 or 37 months. 37 months. Tom will own the water heater. And have paid off his debt. So, pluses and minuses and different things that you might end up playing around with. But if he stretches himself to his limit each month to pay down that credit card, he could have paid off in a little over 3 years. While with the lease, you'll have to keep paying that $17.25 for the entire lifespan of the heater. If I go on to look at Part C, since there's a little bit of relevant information there too, and I do an 8-year comparison, so by the time that the whole lease is up, or by the time the water heater is done, the lease would have cost $17.25 a month, from 12 months, and 8 years. Or the lease would have cost him $1,656 flat out. Buying it would cost 36.31 times 35, or $1,270.85 over a 3-year span, or until the water heater dies. So it looks like if he presses himself to his limit and pays off his credit as quickly as he can, then buying would be the better option for him. In the long run, he would save almost $400 between leasing it, largely because he'd be able to stop any monthly payments after 37 months when he's paid off the debt. Whereas with the lease, he'll have to keep that going until the water heater is done. Which, if he puts a little bit of money aside, he might be able to put more money towards replacing the water heater when it's done. Now, that's a bit of an idealized situation. Chances are he probably wouldn't want to put all of his disposable income onto his credit card. And you can play around a little bit with what changes. If I go back into that and change his monthly payment to what he would have been paying on the lease, then that takes 135 months to pay off, or 11 and a bit years. So at a more reasonable payoff period each month, it would actually take longer than the lifespan of the water heater to pay off. So it all depends on what sort of payment you're able to make and how long you can make it for at that rate, and so on. But those are sort of the big questions you would look at and ask when making that recommendation. If I were making a recommendation to Tom, I would say, if you feel you can keep up that payment for 3 years, or a little bit more than 3 years, then buying it is your better way to go. If you can't, probably stick with the lease. Example 4 comes into property. In example 4, we've got Lance, who started his own construction business 2 years ago. Well, this is on page 125. His business has grown quickly. His home office is no longer big enough. He is considering 2 options. He could sign a 3-year lease on office space with monthly rental payments of $2,000 and a refundable damage deposit of $2,000, but there's a penalty for breaking the lease. He could purchase a house for $285,000 and renovate it so it could be used as an office. A 5% down payment would be required, and he would take out a 15-year mortgage at 5%, compounded semi-annually with monthly payments. Assume appreciation of 2% yearly. And then, what does it cost to lease over the 15 years, and what does it cost to buy over the 15 years? And what would you recommend? Alright, the lease is usually the more straightforward one to work out. So, he's got to put down a damage deposit of $2,000 plus $2,000 a month for every 3 years. Now, assuming he's only going to put down the damage deposit once over the 15-year span, then it would be $2,000 per month times 15 years times 12 months per year. If you put all that together, and you get the down deposit $2,000 plus the $2,000 a month for 12 months for 15 years, you're paying $362,000 to lease the space for that amount of time, including your down payment. The buying question is a little bit more complicated. First, there's the 5% down payment. So 5% of the $285,000 is $14,250. So that's your down payment. The rest you're borrowing. over a 15-year period where you're making monthly payments. So 15 times 12 would be how many pay periods there are in the term. You are borrowing at 5%. You have borrowed 285,000 minus the down payment. You don't know what your payments are going to be, but according to the mortgage, you have paid it off at the end of those 15 years. You're making monthly payments on this, and the debt is compounding semi-annually, so it's twice a year. With that, you can work out what your monthly payments are. $2,133.85. So your total payout is $15 times 12 times $2,133.85 plus the $14,250 down payment. Or $398,343. So immediately, it really looks like the lease is the best way to go. However, there is one other question. And that is home value. Ooh, just got really bright all of a sudden. Pardon me for a second. A little bit better. This house started out being worth $285,000. But it is appreciating at 2% a year. So that means its value is increasing over the original by 2% every year for 15 years. If I work that out, the end of the term, the home is actually worth $383,572.48. So, Lance goes along, pays in total over the 15 years $398,343 to own this house, but he could then sell it for $383,502.48. His total cost is just the difference between those two, or about $15,000. So by buying the house, he only ends up down $15,000 over the run of the year, those years, as opposed to leasing where he pays out $362,000 and has nothing at the end of it. Based on that comparison, buying seems to be the better option. Assuming Lance can sell the house for $383,572.48, buying is the better option. Now, there could be all sorts of sub-reasons why it wouldn't necessarily be. If you're unsure if your business is going to last for 15 years, or that if you even want to do the business for 15 years, that becomes a separate question that then determines whether you want that sort of long-term investment versus the shorter term you can have on a lease on every 3 years, or that sort of thing. Having said that, you could turn around and sell the home at different points along the process if you wanted to, if you were trying to get out of it before 15 years. And by the way, when I ask questions about buy, sell, or lease, sometimes two different people may come up with two different recommendations for what they think is better. As long as they can clearly explain themselves and show their rationale, then that's fine. I could accept that two different possibilities could be logically explained and logically thought out, depending on the situation. One last example. This is example 5 from page 127. And here we're following a couple of couples around. Two couples made different decisions about whether to rent or buy. Helen and Tim bought a house for $249,900. They negotiated a mortgage of 95% of the purchase price, so they'll need a 5% down payment. Our mortgage laws have tightened up a little bit since then, by the way. Nowadays you normally need, I think, at least 10 to 20% of the value of the home for a down payment. The mortgage is compounded semi-annually at 5.5%, has a 20-year term, and requires monthly payments. And then Don and Pat are renting a house for $16 a month. They plan to renew the lease yearly. After 3 years, both couples decide to move. Helen and Tim discover the value of their house has depreciated by 10% over the 3 years. And that's, I assume, not each of the 3 years, but over the entire 3 years. And I'm just going to double check the example for that. Yes, so it's 10% overall, 3 years, not just each year individually. So, 3 years of each of these situations. We'll talk about Don and Pat's because the rent is very simple. $3 years rent at $1,600 per month is 3 times 12 times 1,600. Ooh, a little drink. Dry here. So overall, Don and Pat have paid out $57,600 at the end of 3 years. That's money they're not going to get back, and this money they don't have anything for, so they haven't got any equity in the house. They've just rented it for 3 years, and then they're done. Helen and Tim, it's going to be a little bit more detail. So what they have set up, by the way, the purchase price was $249,900. 5% of that is their down payment, or $12,495. They have set up a mortgage to pay off the rest of it over a 20-year term, and I'll show you how we square that 20-year term with the 3-year time period that we're talking about. They're making monthly payments, so it's going to be 20 times 12 months in the term. The rate is 5.5%. They've borrowed $249,900 minus the down payment. We'll figure out what payments they need to make, with the thought that it will be paid down to nothing after that time. Making monthly payments with semi-annual compounding. Based on that mortgage that they've taken out, minus 12,495. Everything's there. they're making monthly payments of $1,624.78. So now we've got a few more things that we need to work out. Over 3 years, Helen and Tim have paid 3 times 12 times 1624.78. $58,492.08 plus the $12,495 down payment. Total payout $70,987.08. So they have paid out more than Don and Pat, but that's also given them some equity in the home. So they turn around and sell the home, they'll get some money for that. But before we can work that out, we've got to figure what they still owe on that home. So to find out how much they owe on their mortgage, the setup is going to be very similar, only now I'm just dealing with the 3 years that happened. Same interest rate on the loan. They borrowed the same amount up front, $249,900 minus $12,495. They've made the same payments that we figured out before, $1,624.78. But now future value is going to tell us how much they still owe at the end of that time. 12 and 2. So I go in my apps, I work out that amount. They still owe $215,992.52. All right. The home value has depreciated by 10%. So the new value is 90% of the original value. Or $224,910. So this effectively lays it all out on the table. They can sell the house for $224,910. Of that, they're going to have to pay $215,992.52 to the bank. That'll leave them with a slight profit from the sale, which we can then use to compare their situation to Don and Pat's. So, after selling and paying off the bank, paying off the mortgage, I should say, Tim profit, $224,910 minus $215,992.52, or $8,917.48. So overall, they are down $79,870.08 minus $8,917.48 $62,069.60. We put all that together. When everything's said and done for Helen and Tim, over the 3-year period, they're down just a little over $62,000. Don and Pat are only down $57,600. So Don and Pat are doing a little bit better than Helen and Tim were on that deal. Having said that, if the home value hadn't depreciated, if it had appreciated, then Helen and Tim probably would have come out a little bit ahead. And I just want to summarize what went on with Helen and Tim because there's a lot going on there. So, first of all, we worked out a standard sort of mortgage calculation like we may have worked out before when we were talking about debt in general. Working all that out on a 20-year loan, we figured out that Helen and Tim had to be paying $1,624.78 a month, plus their down payment of $12,495. So over a 3-year period, Helen and Tim just straight out paid to the mortgage people $70,987.08. But that gained them some equity in their home. And this is what we were sort of working towards here. After paying down that mortgage for 3 years, they still owed the mortgage people $215,992.52. Their home was currently worth $224,910. So when they sold the home and paid off the mortgage, they'd be left with a profit of $8,917.48. When you balance that against what they paid out over the 3 years in total, they end up being down $62,069.60. Now I say down, but everybody's got to pay something for where they live. So effectively their costs for living in that home for 3 years ended up being $62,069.60. Don and Pat came out at less than $57,600. There are other things to incorporate in all of this, but based on these numbers, I would say that Don and Pat ended up with the better deal for the reasons of just the straightforward comparison of money. Don and Pat paid less, but also where they were renting, responsibility for any maintenance and upkeep would have fallen to the owners of the house and not to them. Whereas if Helen and Tim had to pay anything for any upkeep or changes they wanted to make to the house, that would have been on them, and that would have been more cost that they would have taken on. So overall, Don and Pat's situation seems to be better than Helen and Tim's. So these are the sorts of questions that you can ask yourself if you're confronted with a situation where you need to make a decision about how best to either finance a loan or to just rent something flat out to make life a little bit easier. And there's always pros and cons, and it's always a little bit different what's better for any particular situation. Anyway, that's all I have for this right now. There'll be some questions on the Google Classroom site to go along with this, and thanks for watching.